Hi everyone, it's Brett here, Lionheart84, and it's Sunday the 4th of September, so it's time for my monthly walk around the garden and have a look at what's going on, see if what's got fruits on it, what's got flowers on it, just updates for people interested. So I just sort of say hello first before flipping the camera around, and as I know a lot of people only watch a few minutes of a video or maybe a quarter of a video, I thought I'd ask you to give me a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I thought I'd ask at the beginning of the video for a change while I've still got your attention. Thanks very much. I'm going to stop this introduction now, flip the camera around, as the weather looks like it's going to stay dry for the time being. It's a bit breezy, and get on with the garden tour. So here we are with the September quick walk around and garden tour. I'll try and keep it brief, but there's quite a lot of plants, so it ends up being a 20-minute video, but I'll try and focus on things that might be a bit of interest as we progress, anything that might have fruit on it. Quick look first for the people I know like to see how my dwarf patio peach, Crimson Bonfire's doing with these lovely red leaves. It's had quite a good season. I've been caught out a couple of times with it drying out and drooping badly, but of interest to people like to see, it has actually got, I think, one, and I think there's a couple more. I think there's a peach in here, peach there, and there's one down there as well. I'm just about to see it. Now these are definitely bigger than last year's and look better developed. I'll show you my hand, just about. Not easy to see through the leaves and hold them out of the way, but it looks quite promising. I've no idea when they actually ripen. I might put a bag around it so that if it falls off it doesn't get spoilt or doesn't get attacked by wasps, but it's definitely considerably bigger than last year. These aren't really growing for their edible fruits because they're considered more of an ornamental, so the fruits aren't considered quite very good quality, but nevertheless it's much better than last year, so we'll see what happens. So carrying on with the walk around, got my hardy tamarillo tucked away down here in a pot. Could do with a much larger pot. This is Zafamandra Carimbifolia, meant to be hardy, has flowered consistently all through summer despite being in a smallish pot. It's still got flowers on it now. They've never set. I've been told that you need 2 genetically diverse plants for this, and there's not much point buying another one from the same supplier even if they had them, because I believe they grow them from cuttings, so it would be identical. So if I really wanted to try and get fruit on one of these, I'd have to grow another one from seed, so we'll have to see what happens. So moving to my plant border, got my variegated Chilean Guava in grounds there. That's Ugly Molini Flambeau. It doesn't seem to have any fruits on it this year. I think it suffered from the drought we had and the hot temperatures back in sort of July, and I wasn't watering the plants in the border because I thought they'd be okay, and it seems to have dropped what fruits it had on it, unlike my parents that has plenty of fruit on, so nothing going on that. It's my Kiwi Berry, meant to have been Issai, wasn't an Issai, turned out to be the wrong variety. It has flowered a bit each year, although it got frosted badly, but of course the flowers haven't set because I haven't got yet a flowering size male, although I have now got other Kiwi berries which will cross-pollinate it, but not of a flowering size. So that's about the 4th or 5th year it's been in ground, and of course it's drawn a complete blank unfortunately, but nevertheless it's looking healthy. Had a bit of sun scorch this year, but I might have to try and find a way to protect them in the spring because they keep getting cut back by frost unfortunately in the spring. Moving on and tucking away underneath here, got my in-ground lemon. which I featured in a standalone video, which you may or may not have seen. Perhaps I haven't put it out yet, I'll have to check. Some Myers lemon, has got some small fruits on it. It's not looking too bad health-wise. I'll ignore the tropical plants that are interloping. Here is my Feijoa of the variety Mammoth. It's a pineapple guava, the other name. Plenty of fruits on it at the beginning of September. They're not a bad size. Quite pleased with this one. It's doing better than the Triumph this year. You can see the size of the fruits, probably about 2.5 to 3 centimetres long, maybe 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches. It's got quite a few fruits developing on it. I would say it's probably going to end up with at least a dozen. So we'll see what happens. Blueberries, of course, have all finished fruiting. I mean, there's a couple of these tiny little inedible fruits on here, but of course they're never swollen because of the dry weather we had. And they'll be getting their autumn colours fairly soon. These are not edible, these fruits, they're like little bullets. And my unnamed variety of pineapple guava, not a good plant in terms of genetics. The flowers rarely open up on it, and I think I'll probably pull this one out this summer and see if I can find room for it somewhere in my parents' garden, as it's a nice decorative plant for them to have. Doesn't set fruits very well. It has got 2 or 3 tiny ones on it, but for early September they're very small. I think they'll be struggling to something of interest. On the wall behind is my ornamental passion flower vine amethyst. It's getting pretty old now and really needs to be cut back to the ground, I think, and start afresh. It is still flowering sporadically, but it's quite, they don't, you know, they deteriorate quite a lot as they get old. But interestingly, it's had the odd fruit on it. In front of that is my in-ground persimmon, which I bought. It was just an unnamed seedling. It was the first one I ever got from Burncoos, and that has turned out, unfortunately, to be a male plant. But rather than pulling it out, now it's getting to a decent size, I'm thinking I might be able to cut it back and try grafting on it in the spring and see if I can manage to get any grafts to take. If I can, I could end up with 3 or 4 varieties on one tree. And being an in-ground one, it doesn't seem to suffer from cold damage the way the others do. Still got flowers on my Szechuan Gillesii. It's been flowering all summer. That needs to be cut back in winter. It may stop it flowering next spring, but it'll get too big and out of hand otherwise. My in-ground Pomegranate's done very well this year. Not so much as a single flower bud on it, but at least it's looking very healthy and growing a lot, and I think it'll probably produce a few flowers next year. Certainly nothing wrong with the growth on it. Tucked away behind it on the low down here, still alive, but I think I'm going to have to try and move it, even though it would probably kill it, is my pawpaw, American pawpaw variety sunflower. I think it's too overgrown, too much competition from the other plants, because they're not particularly aggressive growers, the pawpaw. So I think that, unfortunately, has really been suffering from its position. And although it may not take to being transplanted, I think I might dig it out and put it into a large pot and see what happens. My next fruiting variety in ground of pineapple guava is Triumph. Oddly, the fruits seem to be more of a roundish shape this year than last year. Last year they were more of an egg-shaped fruit. Very odd how they seem to vary from year to year. I've no idea if it's something to do with what plants, which varieties I take the pollen on, because I've been using the unnamed variety as a pollinator, to cross-pollinate it. It just seems a bit odd that the fruits These are slightly more elongated, but they just seem to be slightly more rounded this year than previously. Now, just out of interest, the first flower that opened on it, I put string on the branch and it did set fruit, and there's another one here. These two were the very first flowers to open, and that one also set fruit. However, they've not developed as large as some of the ones that the flowers open 2 or 3 weeks later, so perhaps they weren't pollinated very well. Looking around, that's one of my ornamentals. I've still got a few in the garden. That's my butterfly bush that I've got to attract pollinators. In front of it, and just about finished flowering now, my bottle brush decided to flower at the end of the season rather than at the beginning of the season. That's because I cut it back heavily last year, and obviously that affected the flowering time on it. But I'm quite pleased to, quite excited to have seen flowers on it in the end of August rather than back in June. My in-ground seedling American pawpaw, Asamina triloba. It's growing well this year. It's getting bigger and bigger, so I might have to look at pruning it a bit judiciously, otherwise it's going to overwhelm the summer house and this border. And this one set quite a lot of fruits, but unfortunately they all dropped off with the exception of these 3 small fruits which stayed on it. Only 3 this year. I thought I was going to have about a dozen, but the rest have all dropped, unfortunately. They're pretty small really for the beginning of September. They really want to be a fair bit bigger than that, and they look well behind last year. At the moment they look as if they won't ripen for about another 3 or 4 weeks, so there is hope that they'll get a little bit bigger, but sadly only the 3. Despite me trying to hand pollinate them, it tends to be very challenging. Here's my carabine tree, finally doing well in the pot. Had lots of new growth on it this year. Don't expect it to flower, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm more interested in it looking healthy, which it is now doing, and I'll move that over winter to the most sheltered position I've got outside. They are sort of hardy, but it'll look, I'll move it to the corner of my decked area once all the tropicals come inside, because it just gives a little bit more shelter. I've still got my goji berries, and I'm planning to get rid of the plants and plant them in someone else's garden. This one has suddenly started, for whatever reason, late in the season, this one started to grow better and got more flowers on it, but of course it's much too late in the season to set fruits, which by all counts aren't very good anyway. Front of that I've got my natal plum. This is in a pot. This is Carissa macrocarpa. Really well pleased with how this has taken to being repotted. It's got lots of nice new healthy growth on it. Hasn't flowered, not a serious problem. You know, I'm not too worried about that. I'm more interested in the fact that it's looking healthy now. Next to it and in ground is my Chilean Guava Kapow, which, like the other one, suffered badly from the dry spell we had in July and the extreme temperatures. It had quite a lot of flowers on it, and they initially set, but then all of the fruits dropped off except, I think, tucked away, I think, yeah, there's one I think there's one fruit down there, and if they haven't fallen off, I've got a feeling, can't see that they've probably gone. I think it's got one fruit on the whole plant, so I don't think we'll be seeing that. This is one that I bought this summer. This is another Chilean guava. Don't think it's Kapow, I think it's the regular one. And next to it is a myrtle. In ground, I've got my honey berries. Amazing, I just noticed I've got a couple of berries on them, incredibly. I wonder if they're edible. Let's just pull that off and see. I'm amazed to see them in September. They really flower and fruit in June, July. Let's just taste this one. No, it's still bitter and sour as far as I'm concerned. Not for me, those fruit, or at least not that cultivar. Now, my Luma Apiculata has gone insane. I planted this late last summer, just before we got to autumn, and it was half this height, so it's doubled in height. Now it hasn't flowered at all this year, probably because I planted it last autumn and I think obviously it would have disturbed the roots, but it hasn't stopped it growing like crazy. But I think I'm gonna have to do it. I've already taken one large branch off here, but I think I'm gonna have to cut this back this winter, or it's going to be out of control in this bed. I thought it was not going to be a particularly fast growing plant, but it's completely fooled me. So going back to the rest of this raised border, got my in-ground yuzu. Only had one flower on it this year, which obviously didn't set, as we only had the one, but it has grown quite a lot this summer, which is what I was really aiming at. I was more interested in the new growth and it getting established rather than worrying about flowers or fruits, because I wanted to make sure the roots were really in and it had developed its full level of hardiness. So it's done very nicely, and in fact it's got a new shoot coming out on it, which is absolutely fine, but it just didn't flower this year. Next to it I've got my in-ground Obsidium Cattleya. I believe it to be a yellow cherry guava rather than the red cherry or strawberry guava, but there's no real way of knowing just from the just from looking at the flowers. It did flower heavily this year, but not a single one set, and it's put on a load more growth in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's another flush of growth on it, so it's really grown a lot this year, and I'm hoping that means it's going to get to it's going to be established enough to be pretty hardy. At the back of this border here I've got my latest in-ground passion flower, hardy one. This is Incarnata. The Maypop has been flowering consistently. I only put it in I think it was maybe July I got it. As a plant it was only about 1.5 foot tall, but as you can see it's grown really well, still producing loads of flower buds. The biggest problem with these is getting them built up enough the root system to survive over winter here, because they don't really get we don't get really long enough hot enough summers for them to develop the fleshy root system they need to, because they die back to the ground at the beginning of winter, and they need a well-developed root system to survive the winter. But I've put this in a better position than my last one was. There's a lot more sunshine here, and it's a raised bed with better drainage. I'm hoping it might survive the winter. Behind the strawberry guava I've got 2 avocados that were self-sown. When I say self-sown, I think the squirrels buried the stones, and they won't be therefore from avocados that I've bought, so I'm going to guess they're Hass. But as I didn't have any more pot space, I thought, well, they germinated outside, I'm going to leave them outside and see if they manage to survive the winter, but they're very young, so it's unlikely. In ground here was my most recent passion flower. Let's just move over and give you a little bit of a close-up. This is Passiflora actinia, supposed to be hardy, so we're going to see what happens with it. It's just putting out a little bit of new growth there. Actually, it's the first new growth since I planted it about 2 weeks ago, and there's some shoots just appearing down there as well. It's too late in the year, I would say, for it to flower, but if it survives I'll be very pleased. So moving around to some of my plants at the back now here. I repotted. I had 2 white mulberries, white Pakistan mulberries. I think they're king white, that had I actually had 3 which appeared to have died from root rot, so I put them at the back of the garden and moved them into a really well drained compost. I'm really pleased to say that 2 of them have made a recovery. They were also being absolutely wrecked by snails. 2 of them seem to have come back to life. One of them, unfortunately, of the 3 didn't make it, but as I had 3, it doesn't really matter. And what I might do with these, possibly this winter when the leaves drop, I might try and squeeze them into the back of my summer house while they're dormant and see what happens. So carrying the quick tour, this is my Illinois ever-bearing mulberry. Leaves are going a little bit yellow, starting to get dormant now. Next to it I've got a persimmon. This one's meant to be Hanafuyu. I'm not convinced, the leaves don't look like Hanafuyu to me, and I suspect it may have been supplied as the wrong variety, not for the first time in this country. Just getting them named varieties is extremely difficult. This label's getting too tight, so that needs to move up. The stem will be taken off altogether. I'll just move it up for now. It's going to break anyway from the stem expanding, so we'll leave that for the time being. Tucked away at the back here, I've got my two of my newer Kiwi Berries. There's a male and a female. I can't remember the varieties, I'm not going to read the labels now, but they've started to get going this year, so should be promising. I have got a handful of unfortunately very small fruits on my Asian pear. That one's actually starting to go bad. This is Shinziki. Whoops. So unfortunately it suffered from splitting this year, which is the reason this pear's going bad, and it's also particularly small, but I might well be able to cut a bit off that possibly and try it later. It's got a little bug in there, but we'll soon wash him off. And there's a couple more there. They must be close to dropping now, but they're small compared to last year because of I had to repot it and we had some issues with the watering this year. My fault. Didn't get any fruits on my Hong Li. That's the new one that I bought this year. I think it's Kumoy. Let's have a look. Yeah, Nashi Pear Kumoy, new variety. So we'll see what happens with that. Carrying on walking around the little trees at the back here. This is my pink Moldovan mulberry. That's now recovered from repotting, which it badly needed. The first of my 2 surviving grafted jujubes. This one is Lee. Hasn't set any fruits on it, although again it's recovered from root issues that I had, and it's looking quite healthy now. At the back I've got a Lang, which also looks quite good, and down here I've got suckers that have come up on one of my 2 grafted ones that died. So my plan is to grow these on and hopefully graft back onto them at some stage. I'm not going to name all the persimmons. I think we'll flip through very quickly because there's too many to name them all. I'll walk round the front. Oh, that's interesting. Right. So I put a mesh bag round the persimmons which weren't ripe because the tree's been dropping them in September. Now clearly that's not going to be edible. This is Giro. There's one left on the tree. Seemed to have been affected by the weather conditions we've had, as well as by the weather conditions, as well as the sun scorch on them, unfortunately, which burnt the fruits. So they've been a failure this year. Just looking this way quickly, we've got on the ground here is my Cornus. I think it's Cornus Kusa. Doing okay in the pot, hasn't flowered this year, hasn't fruited. In front of it is my Szechuan Pepper plant. That's done really well, a long way from flowering. And I've got assorted fig varieties along the front here, which I'm not going to name them all. One of my mulberries, I think this one's a Carmen. Just walking to the back very quickly, I'm going to show you. I have got some fruits on my pawpaw, which this variety is Prima, and I've decided to bag them because they could fall off at any time, even though they're not mature. So I thought I'd like to catch them just in case they're edible. Again, they're small this year, but I think that's due to the fact that I repotted the plant in spring, which would have badly disturbed the roots, plus the extremely hot weather we've had, which hasn't been ideal. Coming to the back here, looking at my persimmons, I've got a single persimmon on my Garretson, which is that one there, which I discovered recently. However, my Morris Burton, which is this one we're looking at here, I bagged one of the fruits. My Morris Burton's got loads of fruits on it, and in fact even decided to flower again at the end of August. These of course can't set and get to an edible size because we're in September and it's too late, but it's got about, I think, 8 fruits on it, and they haven't been affected by the weather. They are of course an American persimmon, so they're a much smaller variety, but you know, at the end of the day it doesn't really matter. Oh, so I thought one had dropped off, but it hasn't. They are a small variety anyway, because the American persimmons are much smaller. They only get to about 2 inches across, so these aren't a bad size, and I suspect they'll probably ripen in October here. They should be earlier than the Asian persimmons, so I'm hoping the American ones will prove to be more successful. So let's walk out the front again. As I said, I'm not going to go through all the persimmon varieties, there's too many. This is a Japanese raisin tree. It's done okay. Next to it I've got my blue finger or blue sausage plant, which is survived. I don't do very well with these. I don't seem to like being grown in pots, but at least the plant's still alive. And that's a Decaisnea fargesii, for anyone who wants to look up the Latin name. Various persimmon varieties that I'm not going to name. I think you can still see Morris Burton persimmons on it, which I'm really pleased about. My other goji berry, flowering, doesn't fruit. Another mulberry there, that's a Carmen. In front that is a Che, which is a Chinese mulberry. Not particularly fast growing, but looks healthy. And then I've got various assorted excuse me, fig varieties. We'll look at the this is my only named pomegranate that's still looking okay in a pot. This is I think is it Provence or Wonderful? I think it's Provence. Not doing too bad. I'll need to go into a bigger pot next year. Large quantity of main crop figs on my fig tree, but unfortunate fig trees, but these are definitely going to be too small to reach maturity. I mean, the plants are young anyway, but there's no way those figs are going to reach maturity, unfortunately, because the temperatures will be starting to cool down in September, so they will stop growing in about 2 or 3 weeks time. Another pawpaw down there, hasn't done much this year. It's a grafted one I've had for years. They're painfully slow growing. They really need to be in ground, but obviously I've got no more in-ground space to put them, so I'm restricted to trying to grow them in pots. My medlar, I think the fruits might develop to an edible size, but they got badly scorched this year by the freak sun and temperatures we had, which is also, as you can see, scorched a lot of the plant. The leaves aren't very healthy. That badly needs repotting, so I'll get that into a much larger container in the spring, and perhaps I'll prune it back a bit. Perhaps we'll end up with some decent fruits next year. More pineapple guavas. These ones here, these two are very pot bound, to be honest, and have suffered in the heat. I need to get them into larger containers with fresh compost, which I will do over winter, and then I expect them to put out a good flowering display next year. The first one is, that's a Coolidge. Don't think it's had any flowers on it. Next to it I've got an Apollo. I think that had one flower on it. I'm not sure where I saw it, but I think it had a fruit set on it. The one next to it is Marion, which I did manage to repot at the beginning of the growing season, and that's rewarded me with a lot of growth. I think it set one fruit. It had one flower on it, and the fruit has set. It's actually there. It's very small. Be interested to see if it gets to an edible size, because I'd quite like to see if Marion tastes any different to the others, but it's pot luck when you've only got one fruit. Behind it is the first of my pot grown loquats, which I transferred to fabric pots, and I cut it right back because it had a lot of health problems with it. One of the two is Mrs. Cook's and the other one's Oliver, but without going in and having a look, I don't know which one's which, but they've both recovered very well if you saw my early season videos. That's the other one there. They've really come back well and put on a huge amount of new growth, but the growth's too young to form flower buds this year, so I won't see flower buds on them. Next to it is my little donut nectarine tucked away in there. Another Chilean guava down there, variegated one. It's got a few fruits on it, so I might get to eat those. At the back I've got 3 more pineapple guavas. There's a Gemini, another Mammoth and a Triumph. Again, my fault, they're incredibly pot bound and they need to go into much bigger pots, so they've really put on almost no growth this year. They've got a few shoots coming out now and they haven't flowered. There's a black mulberry, that's I think that's agate, that one, that is but that is a genuine Morris Nigra, that one, but they tend to be much bigger before they fruit, so I don't know if I'll get fruits on it ever in containers, but it definitely needs a much bigger container. I've got at least 3 rootstock persimmons where I lost, unfortunately, the name varieties. They're probably all lotus rootstocks, so my hope is to get them big enough to be able to perhaps graft other varieties that I've got onto them and get multi-grafted trees. Obviously I've not got any real experience of grafting, and certainly not on persimmons, so we don't know what's going to happen, but I'd like to get them big enough that I can then take the shoots off and try and multi-graft them. I've just spotted down here, that needs to come off. That's a sucker from the rootstock of my patio donut nectarine or peach, so we'll lose that because we don't want it taking what little strength there is away from the main plant. Again, needs repotting. I'm hoping it'll suddenly take off next year. If we walk round the back quickly, yeah, let's see if there's a name label on this loquat. This one is, that's Mrs. Cookson there. So the other one must be Oliver. So I'm really, as I said, really pleased with how the two have recovered from the massive cutback I had to do at the beginning of the season. If anybody looked at those old loquat videos, they'll be in my loquat playlist. So I'm really pleased with how they've done. Walking around here, it's one of my figs, that one I got, Col de Dame Noir, got that off of Connor. Next to it I've got 2 more pineapple guava varieties. I've got Nikita, and I think the other one therefore must be Unique, and my Unique has actually got fruit set on it, and I think, not sure where I saw them, but I think there's 1 or 2 of my Nikita, but I've got quite good fruit set on the Unique, so I should get to taste those this year. Just going to try and squeeze around the back here because I've got something interesting to show people. Not my figs. Obviously there's plenty of figs on these, but again, they're turning yellow. They're not going to make maturity this year. It's too late, but I'm hoping repotting them will help boost them. And there's a medlar that didn't get cremated by the sun because it's tucked away under the leaves of a fig. And another medlar up there that looks better, but coming round here, because here is my chocolate vine, a Kiwi Berry. The first time it's set fruit this year, you can see it's a good size, should turn a nice bluish purple, I hope. And while they're out the sun, and look, there's 3 more good sized fruits up there. One there that's too small, that's probably not going to ripen to be edible, but really excited to get the first fruits on that this year. So slipping around here, got my Issai, Kiwi Berry, and look, it's trying to grow the wrong way, so I'm going to have to tie that in later so it goes up the fence. Despite being scorched badly by the sun, it has still got fruits on it, but they're showing absolutely no sign. I think these stems are compromised. They're showing no signs of getting bigger or ripening, but at least it held the fruit, so we know it is self-fertile. And next to it is the new one I put in ground, which is putting some decent new growth on it now. It's a bit late in the season, but I'd rather it get established now, and it may flower next year. And then here's my resurrection plants. This was this died off at the beginning of last summer. It rotted off. This was my Passiflora incarnata, and suddenly about 2 or 3 weeks ago it set up a stem, which gave me a big surprise. It's so far behind the other one, I don't think it's going to grow enough to, you know, sort of feed the roots and survive, and it's really in the wrong place because it's on a north facing fence. But nevertheless, I was amazed to see it appear 18 or 15 months after it apparently rotted off and died back. Just a shame it didn't pop up in about June, which would have given it the whole summer to recover. So just to finish off, got my elephants here. Need to split this in a pot. Got some more figs which came from that's Peter's honey. These are the ones that came from Connor, and this one is a black Madeira, allegedly, but as we know with these, you never quite know what you're getting. And just finally, before I do the last fig, it's my Brugmansia. I separated my other plants because it was so badly infested with spider mites. I was trying to stop it spread to the others. And my final little miniature border here, so obviously got my largest fig in, has got some main crop figs on it, but again I don't know if they'll make it to ripeness. It's going to depend on the weather. In September, was bought as a Rouge de Bordeaux, isn't a Rouge de Bordeaux. I think it's probably long due. That was the general consensus of opinion. And oh, just spotted something of interest there. Look at that. There's a grapefruit dropped on the ground, which must mean it's ripe. It's very small, but we'll have a look at that in another video. So basically that's the quick walk around of the garden. I will have missed out some plants, but I just tried to pick out the things that were interesting. I'm going to do a tropical fruit roundup and tour as well. The plants I'm most pleased with, once again, are the pineapple guavas or feijoas. But it's nice to see a few other things have got fruit on, even if the very odd and very hot summer we had this year did mess a few things up. We had a cold spell in April, which unfortunately frosted all the persimmons early growth, which is why only a handful of them got flowers on. They were the ones that happened to have woken up a bit later. And I think it probably affected the pawpaw as well. Plus I repotted a lot of the plants much too late in March when they weren't really still fully dormant, and I think that set them back. But it's what happened time wise. But a lot of them, I still have some that will need repotting this winter, but I'll obviously do them in January or February this time so they don't get disturbed so much. So thank you for watching the video. Kudos to you if you managed to last the whole video. That's a rarity because it's quite a long one, but I appreciate you stopping to watch, even if you only watch 5 minutes of the video, in which case you won't hear this. Thank you. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, and click on the bell if you'd like updates on new videos as they come out. I'll catch up with you all soon. Brett out for now.